We have breaking news this morning. It's tied to the now impeachment investigation into President Trump. A lot of this renewed attention is focused on the president's phone call with the leader of Ukraine and whether there was an inappropriate ask during that call. Well, NBC's justice correspondent Pete Williams has just gotten a first look at the transcript of the call. Pete, good morning. Tell us how it is that you've had a look at this transcript and what you heard.
The so-called transcript, Savannah, these are the notes taken by the official note takers. They're not a verbatim transcript, but officials here at the Justice Department say it is as close to a transcript as is available. It's the best record of this call, made July 25th from the White House residence by President Trump to President Zelensky of Ukraine. The call lasted for about 30 minutes. And let me walk you through the call after having read the notes of the call. Trump begins by congratulating Zelensky for his election victory, and midway through the call says this, quote, "I would like to ask you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it." Now, frankly, it's hard to tell exactly what the president means. DOJ officials weren't able to shed much light on it, what he meant at this point, but perhaps he is thinking that somebody in Ukraine has one of the missing Clinton email servers. Frankly, it's impossible to tell. And then there's one reference to Biden in this call. And by the way, the entire call transcript is about 5 pages, even though the call lasts for 30 minutes. It's a back and forth between the two of them. Trump says this. He says, "I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and was shut down, which is really unfair." And then he says, quote, "There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, what Biden stopped the prosecution. And a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the attorney general would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me." Now, this is the only mention in the call about Biden in this 5-page transcript. And Zelensky replies that he's appointing a new prosecutor who will soon, quote, "look into the situation." Now, here's what happened according to these DOJ officials. Somebody in the intel community heard about this call, not firsthand, but the intel official said he or she heard about it from White House officials and complained to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, suggesting that it could be a violation of campaign finance law. Something was soliciting a foreign contribution. But the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel concluded that the complaint didn't meet the narrow technical standard for passing on a complaint from the intel community to Congress because it wasn't an intelligence activity. It didn't it didn't involve an intelligence employee. But, and this is something we learned today here, the Justice Department said the appropriate thing to do was to refer the matter to the Justice Department's criminal division, and that's what happened. And according to justice officials here, they say this morning that the criminal division, including career employees, concluded that there was no campaign finance violation in this call. They did so after looking at the call, talking to people at the White House about the call, and they concluded that what the president was asking Ukraine to do did not amount to a thing of value, which is what the law would require in order to be the solicitation of a foreign contribution to a campaign. So DOJ said it asked the White House for notes of the conversation and that the White House voluntarily turned them over, and this conclusion was apparently reached here at Justice last week. Now, Trump said in the call that he wanted Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer, and Attorney General William Barr to talk to President Zelensky of Ukraine. But the Justice Department says Barr only found out about the call several weeks after it was made, when the matter was referred here to the Justice Department for investigation, and that Barr has not spoken to the president about this, about Ukraine, or investigating anything relating to former Vice President Biden or his son. The Justice Department says the president has not asked Barr to contact Ukraine on this or any other matter, and it says that Barr has not communicated with Ukraine about this or any other subject, and they also say he's not talked about this with Rudy Giuliani. Now, one other note here, Savannah, The Justice Department says it does not know to this day the identity of the whistleblower. That's known to the Inspector General. But they say in the letter from the Intelligence Committee's Inspector General to the Director of National Intelligence about this, which was forwarded to the Justice Department, the IG himself says there is, quote, some indicia of arguable political bias on the part of the person who made this complaint, Savannah.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.